Namaste, welcome to Satsang today. So there's sometimes a theme that runs through my life each week. I have questions coming up, things being asked and explored. And this week seems to be no different. That the theme for this week seems to be when we have seen clearer and deeper, perhaps than ever before, this contrast then that seems to be experienced by most of us, certainly was for me, where I have begun to see what I really am, that which does not suffer, could not suffer, that which is everywhere, infinite, formless, and eternal. And then the contrast of that between that and still occasionally experiencing, or frequently even, or perhaps 90% of the time, a moment of clarity, and then this kind of seemingly opposite experience of feeling small, contracted, separate, limited again. And we just got a question sent in, which is a perfect example of this. So I'm going to read this out and use it to kind of talk around this subject. So this is seems to be what really needs to be heard at the moment, to be spoken and to be heard. So this may be a question that came in from someone other than yourself, but if it's inside one of us, it's inside all of us. So it will have something, as with all questions and all answers, it's always for all of us. There's something within each one for all of us. So this question says, Dear Helen, thank you so much for all you continue to do to help so many of us, and so lovingly. My question is around something you have no doubt answered many times before. I'm currently experiencing a huge amount of turbulence in my awakening process. The seeing of my true nature as permanent awareness has been happening with increasing frequency and more clearly each time. However, at the same time, I am experiencing huge amounts of despair and emptiness. It's like all the juice has gone out of my life. The awareness somehow feels devoid of any substance or any meaning. It's easy for everything to feel meaningless. This constant yo-yoing between clarity and turmoil is becoming very exhausting. And I often find myself just wanting it all to stop. When does all this come to an end? Is there anything you would recommend I do? With deep, heartfelt thanks and love. So I'm going to answer this, address this in a general way, but I'd also ask if you have time to watch the session I did last night on Awakening Together, because I also addressed a lot of my own journey through that particular process too, and that might be helpful to look at that also. So the yo-yoing that you were talking about between this clarity and this utter confusion and despair, I think that is pretty much one of the worst places to find ourselves, in the middle of our awakening process, so to speak. After a seeing or seeings, no matter how deep or not they have been, we are changed, we are shifted on some level, and our old perspective, the way that we used to look at ourselves, the world, everyone else in our life, is going to be that much more out of alignment with what we have seen ourselves to be. So even if that's only currently a theoretical understanding, even if you haven't experientially realized the truth at all yet, this will still be what's going on for you. What you know to be true is becoming so clearly different to what we thought was true about ourselves. And this is why this yo-yoing, this discord, this increasing gap between what I know myself to be and what I keep experiencing in my old way. And this despair and this hopelessness, those were words I used on that session last night too. And the person that sent this question in obviously has had a deeper seeing, but this was already happening to me after I'd even begun to realize that there was something called awakening to, I'm going to use the word achieve, but it's not an achievement, but I don't have any other suitable word right now, that there was something to aim for, to understand, to realize. I was already feeling this same way, very polarized experience. And it started off as half and half. Half the time I felt open, peaceful, light, free. And like there could never be anything wrong with me or the world or anything like that. And then the other half of the time, feeling that everything was wrong with me and everything was wrong with the world, and that I couldn't even remember a time where it felt true that the opposite, where I felt I was stuck in this dark corner of my own consciousness and just could not break out. So what's happening there, when we look at that, we can begin to understand it. That's how we begin to move beyond it. So we've said many times, it's our old thought processes coming to the surface in contrast to now to be examined against what we've seen to be true, that I'm infinite, formless everywhere, that there are no other beings, that everything I see and experience, everything that exists is my own self, the supreme being, the one consciousness. But we can maybe come to see that also still functioning is this egoic sense of self, this separate sense of self that's kind of running on its own momentum. And its momentum is trying to get somewhere, trying to get to a place where it feels better, where everything makes sense. And more and more as we see the truth of our real being, that we already are that and could never not be that, which is everywhere, formless, including all of this, appearing as all of this. Then this mechanism of forward motion to try to get somewhere where everything makes sense, where I feel okay, where I feel safe, where I feel loved, lovable, all of that, begins to make less and less sense to keep traveling. So what remains of our egoic sense of self is becoming more disillusioned, more disheartened, more with a sense that life is meaningless, purposeless, all of that. So there's this, everything's okay exactly as it is, and never has anything or could be wrong. And then this, it's pointless. There is no hope. There is no point in even trying to move forward. And yet all this egoic sense of self can do is try to move towards some future moment where it feels it will be happier than it is now. So just understanding where this despair comes from, this really intense, everything that the egoic sense of self thought to be true, which we did previously think was us, is being torn apart. That awakening, that happiness, that freedom is in some future moment, which is the reason for all of its forward momentum. Becomes clear that happiness is available now in this moment. And all it can do is try to move away from this moment, this separate sense of self. So from its perspective, it feels totally useless, irrelevant, unloved, unwanted, all of those feelings. So here's where this kind of dark despair, these heavy energies come from, this meaninglessness that begins to, what's the point? And I remember voicing clearly these words, what's the point of coming to satsang? What's the point of meditating? What's the point of doing any self-inquiry if it's not going to get me anywhere? There's this egoic voice. What have I spent the last at that point for me, 20, 21, 22 years doing, actually, if there's nowhere I can get to. And this was in such a stark contrast to this, knowing that I never left home, ever. That all of my practice, all of my seeing, all of my inquiry, all of my meditation, every single satsang I'd ever watched had been to see clearer where I already am and could not move away from. So just understanding why this polarity seems to exist, it begins to allow it to dissolve. If you've believed something to be true your entire life, this whole human incarnation and many incarnations before, many bodies have come and gone before you got to this point. And for that whole time, you've believed that you were separate and that you were personally responsible for finding your own happiness, your own peace, your own freedom. And that the way to do that was to move towards some future moment away from where you are now in this I'm going to get there eventually mechanism. And to suddenly have that all called into question, and even worse, to be seen that that's utterly untrue. Here's where this, what's left of our belief system is really struggling, because you might be able to kind of recognize inside that maybe our whole reason for going to work, for raising a family, for pursuing any hobbies that we have, for wanting awakening, is that I will feel better when I get there in that future moment. I'll be freer, happier, more loving, more lovable. I'll be liked more. I'll be more successful. I'll be able to allow in abundance. I'll fill in the blank. You know, we've all got a long list that of things that we will be able to receive when we get there, or experience when we get there. So for me, there was this humbling of this having to really embrace this separate sense of self that was falling apart. So like some crumbling old building that can just no longer stand because its foundations have been taken away. You're not just going to let it, if you can, give it some love and understand why it feels so, and it feels so extraordinarily real when you're in those moments. And there's just this sense of, I've forgotten the beautiful seeing I've had. I can't even remember what that feels like currently, to feel peace or joy. And I don't feel like I'll ever get back to that. And for me, as this progressed, it flipped to 95% of the time. And then eventually 99% of the time, I was in this kind of black hole of despair, pointlessness, meaninglessness. And the thoughts that were running through my mind would give concern to anybody listening. I don't want to go on anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. Those kind of thoughts were very frequent, and only perhaps 1 or 2% of the time was I experiencing this beautiful opening, clarity, insight, epiphanies. Everything's all right with the world. I'm perfect just as I am, all of that. So this shift over to 99% instead of 50-50 was because I wasn't embracing. I wasn't being this loving acceptance of this egoic sense of self that's falling apart. And it's really only when I began to try to understand why it felt that way. And I'd seen that it wasn't true. I wasn't a separate being, and I was so busy pushing it away. You are not valid. You are untrue. You should just go away. I should stop experiencing this. I want this beautiful experience all of the time. And I thought that by pushing it away, that was the way to make that happen. So what can we do? You asked me, what would I advise you do? Is begin to lovingly embrace. Imagine someone, you met this person and you become friends with them, and their belief system was very, very different to yours. And they were caught up in separation. They were just so completely scared of themselves, the world, everything. They felt desperately unworthy. How would you try to help them? Would you, if they needed your comfort, your compassion, you wouldn't just try to push them away. You would try to be there for them until they could consciously come to recognize that their belief system is what's causing them their issues rather than the actuality of themselves. And yet we're all doing this with our egoic, what's left of our egoic sense of self. However much that's dissolved, we're all generally in resistance to it, wishing it would just go away. So for me, there was this, what would the self, what would that beautiful knowing do with this despair moment when it arises? It would totally embrace it. It would totally go into it. It would totally support it, validate whatever it was feeling. Yes, the beliefs the ego has are not true, but it does think they're true, right? And therefore the body feels that. Mostly our body suffers because we're trying to push that away. It's not true. It should just go away. Why is it still going on? It should just disappear. And I want to somehow shift this 99%, flip it so that I'm 100% feeling only peace, love, light, and joy. But the way to that, of course, is to deeply embrace that aspect of us that's still suffering. Deeply embrace. What do I mean by embracing? Understanding. Everything it ever thought to be true has just been pulled out from underneath it. And there's like this small child inside each one of us that's terrified of this great big infinite self as it thinks it to be, that's going to come and annihilate it, squash it, and push it out, when really all it wants to do is be included and allowed in. So the reason for this polarity is what's keeping these two states separate, for want of a better word, because they're not states, is my pushing against it. The more I push against it, the more polarized my experience becomes into two. When I welcome it, it comes back inside the greater space of my being and begins to dissolve even faster. And then for me, there was peace, love, joy, an absolute sense that everything is okay. And a body inside that was feeling despair, feeling fear, feeling shame, whatever it was, but it was just so gently and lovingly held by my real nature. And finally, this small child just said, I'm safe. I'm safe. I can feel there is nothing that's going to annihilate me or reject me. And it's okay that my beliefs were seen to be meaningless, because here's something even better. And my remnants of my egoic sense of self found a way to kind of function as this vehicle for the self to speak through. So I absolutely get it, because I spent a long time pushing against this. And it's the last thing we want to do as human beings, to embrace despair, sadness, hopelessness, meaninglessness, isn't it? It's the last place we want to go, especially when we've just had a taste of peace and clarity and insight and all of that freshness and aliveness and vitality and well-being that is the real essence. But what would that real essence do with something or someone that's suffering? Would it push it away? And this is really the non-duality of it all. In the end, I can keep separating myself from it and living in duality, my real nature and my false nature, my old way. Or I can allow this to come back inside, which is all it needs to feel loved, to feel safe, and then it begins to dissolve and disintegrate. So what would I do if I was in your position? Well, I have been, and I would run towards the worst feeling that you experience. I would run towards it. And what do I mean by run towards it? I mean, be willing to feel it. Just be willing to feel it. You don't have to like it. You're never going to like, I don't like feeling fear, despair, shame. Still, they don't happen for me very often at all now, but I still don't like it. I prefer peace. But peace comes also at the same time, love, a deep and rich compassion for that part of us that's kind of dismantled and fragmenting inside our old sense of self. As you would for a loving friend, an old friend that's struggling, or as you would pick up a insect that's got turned upside down and put it back the right way up so that it can carry on. And this is what we're doing with our old sense of self. It's okay. How you feel is okay. I can't believe it anymore, but I'm also not going to make you wrong. You're welcome here too. And in the space of this, love begins to dissolve. So can you run towards it instead of away from it? Can you feel that pushing it away really isn't working? And that's actually the cause of all of our suffering here now. The real non-duality, non-dual means not two. It means these two have to come into the same. They have to, I'm going to use the word merge, but that still suggests two into one. They have to exist in the same space at the same time. You have to welcome this as the self, which is to understand, to want to help, to embrace, to include this old sense of self rather than exclude. Because excluding anything becomes the whole source of pain. If you are one, if you're everywhere and infinite, then anything that you're rejecting, you're making two right there. Me and what I'm pushing away. And I found out I was absolutely flawed. I was amazed to find out that it wasn't really my old egoic sense of self that was causing the hurt. It was simply and only the fact that I was rejecting it, because that's all I knew how to do at the time. The moment I stopped rejecting it, and maybe you can feel this right now as I'm talking, something began to soften. The frequencies of the egoic sense of self began to lighten. There was, eventually it all dissolved back into peace as I allowed it back in. It was just an excess of peace and contentment, which then began to deepen into love and joy. So it might be the last thing we want to do. And usually I only embraced it when I had tried everything else and it didn't work. Everything else made it worse, in fact. It really has never, ever worked for any of us, ever, at any time in human history, that pushing something away makes us feel better. We might avoid it temporarily, but we know it's coming around again. And as you said in your question, just can't do that anymore. So what is, if the egoic sense of self is feeling meaningless and purposeless, what is the purpose of life then? What is the meaning behind all of this? Could it be this, to simply include what we've excluded from that greater place of our being? Include, allow, embrace, all words for love, aren't they? If that isn't the meaning of life, then I haven't found a better one than that currently. To allow back in what we couldn't deal with as a separate sense of self, as a separate being, and allow that back into our real nature to finally come home and transmute itself into peace, love, and joy, which it's always been trying to do. Despair, hopelessness, all of these very low energies are simply where it has to hang out if we're not letting it change and move up through the energy system. So have a feel out of that and see if hopefully that gives you a direction forward, or inward, I should say, to work with this. The only thing that we're suffering from ever is the sense of two. And here's where it's hanging out for you currently. What I know to be true, what I used to think was true. And of course you kind of want to go like that, but we tried that, it didn't work. I've never met anyone for whom that worked. And eventually we're back to what would the self do with this? What would love do with this? What would the consciousness do with this? It would just kind of allow it to exist, surrounding it, understanding it, not trying to change it. And then everything changes from there. So hope that is helpful for you. I have one or two more here I'm going to read. I'll take up to 4 questions online as well. If you want to put your hand up, I'll read these 2 quickly. This one says, hello, I'm a little bit confused. Excuse me. I'm a little bit confused between accepting what is, no resisting, and lesson 2, where we question beliefs that lie behind unwanted feelings, so the manifested reality changes. So lesson 2 being referred to here is in the Dissolve the Ego course, where we look deeper into questioning the beliefs we've held to be true our whole life, such as I'm not safe, which is the cause of all fear, things like that. So how do we reconcile these two? How do I accept what is and also question my old beliefs? Well, maybe they're the same thing, actually, said a different way. Questioning a belief is not trying to change that belief or even change the manifested experience that is a reflection of that. It's simply questioning, is this true, actually? I've always just thought it would be true. It is true, and I kept experiencing it. If I really accept this belief, I'm curious about it. Is it true? I really would like to find that out. So they seem to be opposites, accepting this moment as it is, and then questioning if something is true. But could they be the same thing? So where I'm accepting what is, I'm also have to accept that there's a desire for my experience to improve. That's also part of this moment, isn't it? If I'm accepting this moment, and this moment is something that I would rather not experience, something's going on inside it, and then I also have to accept that there's a real desire within me for that to be different. That's part of accepting what is. What is also includes, I really don't want this thing that's happening. So as we're embracing that too, that desire, we can gently question the thought. And it isn't that the manifested reality changes, because the manifested reality has no real existence outside of you. So what's happening is, it's like standing in front of a mirror and you move to one side. The reflection seems to move as well instantaneously. But the reflection has no reality of its own, does it, without you standing in front of it? There's no body image in the mirror without you there. So it's not that manifested reality is changing. It's just, it reverts back to its natural state of abundance. The highest thing that can manifest in that moment does. The moment that you're free of filtering your experience through that belief, I'm not safe, I'm not good enough. So maybe I would, for you, I would really look at those and ask, you can ask this question, are they really two opposite things here? Accepting what is and questioning this belief. You'll find beautifully when you look at that, that they are, in fact, 2 ways of saying the exact same thing. Okay, so I will just read one more. Okay. There we go. Hi, Helen. Your teachings have helped me a lot. Ever since I saw your interview on Backgap, I dropped all other teachers and teachings. I've been watching all your satsangs and read all your books. I watch them every day and use the practices. You could say I'm a big fan. Now I'm pretty much in constant contemplation. One thing I seem to do, though, is I try to stick to one question as you recommended, but it tends to branch out into lots of other questions, and I get unsure if I should pursue the other ones or not, or if I'm diluting the result. I guess in reality, excuse me, it doesn't really matter in the end, as I'm already the self and it will work out. But I'm still curious on your thoughts about it. So glad the teachings are really helping. And try to stick to one question, but it tends to branch out into other questions. So should I, and it comes up quite often for a lot of people, should I stay with the original question when I'm contemplating? And then stick with that no matter what, or should I go with these other questions that are coming? So as you're contemplating, is this really true? You start with one particular question. Is it really true I'm not worthy of happiness? Or, for example, just using that. What might come out of that is maybe a question arises, is it true I can't be happy? Some variation on a theme like that. And this new question comes often because, well, there's two reasons. So you can check this out. Your body's there to help you with it. If the question changes, does the new question feel worse in your body, lower frequency, or better, a higher frequency? Does it feel more exciting, more expansive, more open? Or does it feel flatter, kind of less interesting to you? If it's flatter and less interesting, or maybe downright constricting, you feel it comes with a constriction in the body or some negative emotion, that is because it's a question that the mind has thrown at you to try to throw you off the path. So it's a question that's coming from resistance, not wanting to look at this question that you originally started with. So if it feels worse in any way at all, I would disregard that question, and your body gives you real-time feedback on that. So the question shifts and I feel it out. How does this feel compared to my original question? And if there's something about it that just feels off, or my body is telling me this is not the right question, or you can even ask, is this resistance or guidance actually? Is this true guidance or resistance? And you get a real positive yes feeling if it's guidance. This is the right way forward. And this is happening because my energy is shifting and releasing these lower frequencies as I'm contemplating. If you get a sort of a negative feeling by any, and you need to test this out in your own body, get used to your body's yes and no answers. For me, if something is the way forward, I get goosebumps. I feel excited. I feel inspired. And it's easier for me to remember the question. If it's resistance, I'm kind of struggling to remember it, and I'm doing it more from a mechanical place. And hang on a minute, something's not right here. And then sometimes my body starts to feel constricted too. So it's either resistance, that the question's changing, or it's real-time guidance. This is closer to the root of the issue, this question. And you're homing in on you can feel, right, there's something right in that question. I really like that one. It's exciting. There's something about it. And you probably experienced that before already. You've got kind of really obsessed with the question. Even if you don't know why, it just keeps coming without much effort. You keep remembering to ask it easier. So it's really, really common. And you're right, in the end, it doesn't matter. But the whole reason we're contemplating is to get back to peace faster and back to our original seeing faster. So your body is there to give you real-time vibrational feedback of the frequency, the energy level of that question. Because it could be a very similar question in words, but from a very different place, a really resistant place inside that is just scared to look at this issue. Or it could be a question that theoretically sounds more negative. Is it true I don't deserve to exist? It might come out of that question that you're originally asking, and that sounds quite negative. But it actually feels really inspiring because it's really where consciousness wants to go right now and look at this. I really want to see this, and this is much closer to the original issue than, is it true I don't deserve to be happy or something? So I hope that helps. We'll go to Elaine whenever you're ready. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. I don't think I'll ever be ready for this, but I think the whole topic this morning of contemplation, I'm going to ask for help to deal with shame.
Yes.
I mean, everything you've said, you know, how the mind will take you away. And I know it's something that is quite deep. And I guess this is as far as I get.
Yeah.
You know, and then it'll be whatever to take me out of it. I guess that third hand that comes out and presses the button, I just heard you talking this morning and thought, now's the time to get help with something that I need.
So let me start by saying, you know, well done. You've been extraordinarily brave, and you are loved and supported by me and everyone here. We're all rooting for you. And I think, you know, we can all identify with how you're feeling. We've all, the shame was my unwanted best friend for such a long time. And it was the last, I'd rather look at fear or anger than shame. There was something really unappealing, did not want to go there. And I'm saying that because there's this kind of mechanism that tries to distract you. You've said you get so far and then something happens, and just this urge to protect, to feel better. So I don't really want to look at this because I don't really want to go into this. It's, you know, kind of get this. It's easier to go and watch another satsang or read something in a book that's going to uplift you, and it feels good at the time, but then after a while you kind of realize, hang on a minute, I'm not actually getting to the core of this. So I think one of the bravest things a human being can do is face shame, actually, because it is perhaps the last place we'd want to go, because shame suggests that there is something deeply wrong with us, fundamentally flawed, or something like that I am, or I have done something completely wrong, or something like that. You can get a taste of it, can't you? Obviously you're feeling it right now. And then even because I haven't realized I'm avoiding dealing with it, I'm getting distracted. I might even feel shame about that. I can't even actually seem to, and it cycles around, you know, why can everyone else seem to get past this and I'm not, you know? So I've been right there where you are. I have to say that because I don't want you to think for a second that you're the only one that can't seem to get beyond this. We have very intricate inbuilt mechanisms as human beings that are there to stop us looking at things like this, because it's too painful as a separate being, isn't it? And only now, as the self, however deep your awakening's gone, can you actually sit here and put your hand up and go through this and all of that. So what I would suggest, more than actually contemplating it right now, is just spending a couple of days, if you can, understanding and forgiving yourself why you haven't been able to stick with looking at this. All right, that there's something within us that does not want to go there, and that's natural self-protective mechanism that was necessary even as a separate being. Because if I were to find out that there is something actually really fundamentally flawed about me, that there's no way back from that. So only as the self can we actually look at it. And that starts by, because as the self, we're going to realize it's untrue. It's never been true. It's just a very seductive, well-believed thought with a lot of momentum. So I would spend some time, if I were you, perhaps just gently noticing the ways you distract yourself without realizing. And most of it's unconscious. I sit down to contemplate this, and next thing I know, I'm in the kitchen putting the kettle on, or somebody knocks on the door, or I'm watching, you know, catching up the latest episode or something. And I might not even remember that I was going to contemplate this for maybe a few days even, or hours at least. So just kind of seeing that mechanism of distraction as a thing that was useful and helpful, not making that wrong. It was useful, it was helpful. Now we can let it go. We're not making it wrong. And sometimes just doing this is enough to shift the shame. Because the shame for me was hanging on, why can't I actually manage to finally look at this? I've tried 100 million times and I can't seem to stay with any particular question around this. So understanding why that's been happening and forgiving yourself, that mechanism was necessary and needed to protect you from looking at things you couldn't resolve as a separate being. Can you get a sense of it?
Yes. Yeah, I can. I think when I have sat there, I tend to then find I get overwhelmed with stories,
Yeah.
with, situations that I feel shame is to blame, or
Yeah.
shame is the thing that keeps me from love.
So that's not a helpful process then, is it? Because it's cycling around to, if I could just get rid of this, this and this and this and this wouldn't have happened. So just noticing that in itself is a distraction technique, because if I start to feel overwhelmed, I'll feel like there's no way forward and I'll move away from it. So here we are right now doing this work that I've just said. Here's the one way that I distract myself without realizing. I kind of get to a place of feeling overwhelmed. And I just kind of, I can't right now. I can't, some feeling inside.
Yeah, I can't seems to be my mantra. It was strange then, just using in the same sentence, shame and love.
Yeah. You wouldn't have done that before.
No, it's just like, it's like, can shame be love?
Yeah. That's a atomically powerful question.
Right.
I don't know if you feel the power in that question, but there's something huge there. Can shame be love? And actually, what we're doing right now is loving that shame. We're trying to understand its mechanisms, its reason for existence, its reason for hanging on. What we're also trying to understand why we're trying to avoid it on some level. So that's actually, we're actually embracing it, aren't we, in that love. And we're meeting, because perhaps shame has only ever met with rejection or avoidance before. So something significant is really happening here. Can you feel something moving?
Yeah, just because when you were talking, I was thinking, I can't do that. I can't allow shame. I can't do it. And then suddenly, when in that sentence, there was a shift. I felt, oh, this is possible.
Yeah. And I can feel somewhere inside my being that they are the same thing somehow. And I'd like that to resolve.
Yeah.
How incredible if I could come to see that shame is love and love is shame, that they're perhaps two ends of a spectrum. I've been calling them different things. And I've been really wanting one and really pushing the other away.
Yeah.
Of course, that's all I could do. Just that understanding is beginning to see. If I'd have sat here with you and gone through the contemplative process with you, you'd have had some understanding and epiphany. But the very next time you tried to do it by yourself, the same avoidance would have come up. So it's much quicker and easier to kind of look at why we're avoiding it. Yeah. And even doing that, my sense is that you've that's the only thing that's keeping it in place. Do you get a sense? Yeah.
It's like I've turned it from a weapon into maybe a friend.
Yeah.
That kind of.
A friend that you kind of feel sorry for, you feel compassion for, and you want to help. So something like that, isn't it? It's a different energy you're coming, and that's love in action, isn't it? That's your real nature, how it would be with this shame right now. And to me, that is what I would stick with now.
Yeah.
Why have I avoided it unconsciously? How am I doing that? Can I bring that into my conscious awareness with no blame? No shame about that, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That third hand is ever so useful.
It is. It's often unwanted, right? My hand's gone up and I really don't want to talk about this. How on earth am I, but it's very useful. Third hand, I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so
Thank
brave,
you.
sharing, Elaine. Thank you. Okay, Sergio, when you're ready.
Thank you, Helen. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Very early morning for you.
Yes. My question is maybe two in one. The first one, how I don't seem to recognize when I'm rejecting something. I might feel relaxed and the emptiness, the noumenon.
Mhm.
And then I get these thoughts about, for instance, work, or your boss look at you somewhat angry, and then the stories start to come in,
Mhm.
and fear comes into the body, and so I don't realize that as the fear comes into the body, or these thought stories about work, I don't seem to know that that's my resistance.
And it
And
happens
then
very
the body,
gradually, doesn't it? It's so gradual. It sneaks back in with just maybe even a happy thought. I'm just empty and I'm free. And then I have this positive thought that feels good. And then before I know it, the thoughts have just successively gone, down and down. And before I know it, I'm really contracted and fearful. And
right? And then I don't realize that. And then on the other hand, how could I merge the two ends of the spectrum, as you were saying to Elaine, into loving and acceptance? Okay, this is the fear.
Mhm.
So how to embrace it, how to for one moment recognize that I'm rejecting something, that I'm not accepting it because I have this resistance, and on the other hand, how to see, okay, this is just a baby, and pamper it and love it, and yeah.
So it's really good, and it seems to be the whole topic of today's satsang. In fact, this whole week is that. So if you notice, let's say we did a deep meditation here in satsang, and you came out of that meditation like, oh, everything's fine, everything's fantastic, and then by the time you've got to work or got through to lunchtime at work, you stop and you check in and you feel that your body's really feeling quite terrible, contracted, maybe there's anger or fear, like you were saying. In that moment, there really seems to be two, doesn't there? There really, how I was feeling when I came out of satsang, and then I felt so loved and accepted by everybody and all of that. And then this is a very different experience I'm having in my lunch hour or whatever is going on. And for me, it took a real sincere, honest look at how I was handling when that contraction happens, when some thoughts got a hold of me and I've gone into this lower frequency, and it's been going on long enough that I haven't realized. Maybe it's been hours, maybe it's been days, sometimes weeks before I realized that I'd lost this peace, seemingly lost this peace and acceptance. The one thing that happened every time when I noticed how my body was feeling was blame, some blame. I should not have let that happen. I should have been more vigilant. I should have been paying attention more. I should have been checking in more. You get the idea, right? Like kind of like we were talking about with Elaine.
Exactly.
Yeah. And those thoughts really seem to make sense, because I had this idea that by checking in more, by being more vigilant, that was how I stopped that happening. This losing of this beautiful high place where I went back into a deep identification with illusion as a separate being. That by being more vigilant, checking in, all of that. So the blame thoughts were really accepted and really valued until I began to see that that just wasn't working. That I could check in 10 minutes after satsang from a place of just wanting to see how my body's feeling, and that would be effective. Or I could check in 10 minutes after satsang from, I really must be vigilant, I shouldn't let this, and that would be ineffective.
Right, okay.
So I was doing all this vigilance, checking in, trying to, how am I feeling now? How am I feeling now? But it was coming from this very low place of, I'm not doing good enough with this. I'm not up to par here. I'm not who I need to be here. And actually, when I really started to embrace that was the issue. Not that I'd picked up some fear, not that my boss had looked at me wrong, not that I've run out of money again, not that I'm feeling some real contraction in my body. It's what am I doing with the fact that that's happened? How am I holding that in my consciousness? And I began to really practice, if it's happened again, it's happened again. That's all. So loving acceptance of, so I've gone into illusion again. So what? Because the opposite of that was, I'm doing it again. Why am I still doing it again? Why is this still going on? Why can't I seem to hold on to peace? All of those self-blaming. It's impossible to come back to peace when we're blaming ourselves about anything, really. Even holding on to peace. So at whether it's 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks after, when you realize, oh, I'm really back in it again. I'm back in this illusion again. What do you do then? Pop quiz. What do you do right now? So, and I noticed this knee-jerk response, this reflexive, something really has gone wrong here. This is something that's my fault. I've done this wrong. You get a sense of it?
Yes. I see.
And how would the self, okay, for the last 2 weeks, I've been completely oblivious to where I'm at. I've just completely gone into this illusion. I've been living it, having a miserable time for the last 2 weeks, or 2 minutes, 2 hours, whatever, 2 years sometimes for me. Just what would the self do with that? It would say, oh, well, that wasn't pleasant. That was extremely unpleasant, but it happened. Can't change it. It just happened. I prefer it didn't, but it refused to go into any blame about it.
Okay.
And then somehow there was more power in the body, more power in the mind, more light there to catch it after 2 hours rather than 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then an hour, and then half an hour, and then 2 minutes. And then eventually, I'm doing it right now. I'm just about to go off with this thought train. Because the energy of self-blame is just depleting the life force in the body so much that you can't see it happening. You literally cannot see it coming until you feel so terrible that then you notice. And you've usually had some experience that mirrors it, your boss is really cross with you that day or something.
Yeah, okay.
So not that thing itself, but how you're handling it. Where are you handling it from? Who are you doing it as? And what would an awakened being say to you if you got lost in illusion again? Would they say, you really shouldn't have done that? Why weren't you paying more attention? All the things we say to ourselves, they'd be like, okay, so it happened. It wasn't fun. It wasn't pleasant, but it doesn't change who you are and what you are, does it?
Definitely not. It doesn't.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Terrific.
Does that get both of them? Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll take Don's question and we'll leave it there for today. Whenever you're ready, Don. You're still muted there.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, got the other half of my attraction to work on this weekend and this week. My girlfriend and I have been working on a couple books together, and she branched off and did another one, and then which is pretty advanced, and it's something that's not as much directly to what I'm been doing, but she built on a lot of our work to do this. And then she told me she wanted to give it to this, show it to this man who's, you know, pretty powerful in the business, and he could run with it. And I was like, I looked at it, and you know, there's a couple paragraphs of my work in there, but basically it's her work and new work, and it's not mine. But it's built upon the work that she and I started together. And I wanted to sort of be able to, how can I deal with, you know, have some, I guess, some jealousy or some feeling like she's going to get her work launched before our work gets out.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, this is her work. But at the same time, I want to, like, what happened to, why aren't you doing the drawings and doing the stuff we need to do for the book that we've already written? Why are you ignoring that one? And so it's just, it feels like, and there's a part of me that thinks, well, this may be the best catalyst for me to go ahead and, you know, see what I need to do about moving forward. So I don't know. I just wanted to see what you did.
There's a tangled up stuff there, isn't there? You know, maybe it's about what stuck out for me there was you mentioned the word jealousy, but maybe it's an opportunity for you to speak clearer what you want and need from that process. You know, are you being absolute or as truthful as you can in the way that you're communicating with her about the fact that you know, maybe she'd promised to do certain things that haven't been done and is proceeding with something else. So whatever's inside you about it, are you voicing that firstly to yourself? So are there emotions there that you're not accepting fully? Maybe there's some disappointment or something like that going on. Jealousy, as you said, maybe we can acknowledge that. So what is it about the experience that you're not admitting to yourself first about the way things are right now? And then with that, can you then there'll become a clearer, but more clarity to voice what you would like to happen moving forward to her. So accepting it inside yourself, what's actually not rationalizing away how you feel, and just accepting, actually, I feel quite, I don't know, I'm just going to use some words like disappointment, maybe hurt, something like that. I don't know, but looking at within your own self and seeing what's in there. And then as a basis for clearer communication. And if it is, okay, this is the best platform now for you to go and do your own thing and have great success, that's great, but you will know rather than trying to guess, you know, figure that out inside. Jealousy was another unwanted best friend of mine the whole way through my awakening. But it suggests, if we look at the mechanism of jealousy, it suggests that someone else has what I want or is experiencing what I want to experience, and I'm not having it. So when I really looked at, because I really got very tired of feeling jealous of everything and everyone, the mechanism of jealousy is in separation. This other being has what I want and I don't. So I had to come to see, to really move through jealousy, to use it as a positive thing. If someone is experiencing it out there, that must also be me. Therefore, it must be possible for me here to experience the same thing. So she's experiencing success and excitement and moving forward, inspired. It must be possible for you to experience that too right now. How that unfolds, we don't know, but just taking the separation out of jealousy. They have it, therefore I don't and can't. Can you feel that at the core of jealousy is that sense of limited resources, even of feeling how I want to feel, because that person out there feels it and I don't. So just kind of taking the separation out of it. And then if I'm seeing it out there, it must be possible in here too. So that would be my suggestion of how to kind of work with it. My feeling is that there's emotions inside you that you're not admitting to yourself about this. Maybe you're a little angry about it. Maybe you're trying to avoid looking at that.
Well, I think there's some, originally I was, we were not really seeing each other for a while, but and she reached out to this man to help her, and she did show him some of our original work, and he gave her a scholarship to his program. Now she's certified in the business and I'm not, and that was on the back of our work. And at the time I was paying for a patent attorney and the US Patent Office to pay for her daughter's business to be what's the word, I guess, copyrighted.
Mm-hmm.
And her brand. And so while I'm out copywriting her daughter, and she's out moving past me, and with our in the field that we're in, and that's kind of stings, I think. And
have you really looked at that? Have you really let yourself feel that emotion fully?
No.
That would be where I would start there, to really honoring yourself, because if someone's doing something that doesn't feel right, isn't in your best interest, perhaps it has to mirror somewhere inside ourselves that we're not doing what's best for us, where we're not really accepting. There's a powerful message being given by this emotion that needs to be really looked at. And then I can get a clearer way forward with what I want and allow that to unfold.
Do you hear a question in there for me to work with?
I would really look, you said the word sting, it stings.
Mm-hmm.
I would really look at that. What is that feeling saying to you? Maybe some old echo of feeling betrayed or feeling I don't know what that would be for you, but what does that feeling suggest to you? Here we go again, it's happening again. Life isn't fair. Whatever belief comes up from that, and really embracing that hurt and see what it wants to tell you. That would be what the question comes. That I would spend some time with. Maybe you get a sense of it now, or maybe you just want to sit with it.
Yeah, I'm getting some of that. As soon as you labeled that stinging, and the betrayals coming back, and then the the underlying, where have I felt betrayed before? Where have I betrayed before? And that.
So it's easy to move forward once we've really looked at how we're feeling. None of us want to feel that feeling, and we can tend to spiritualize and gloss it over. But just feeling it the best we can and looking at the message it's trying to give us, then we don't have to keep going through the same cycle. Whether this has all happened intentionally or unintentionally, at this point, that bit, we can leave that for a moment. We can deal with the message inside and then really question that, contemplate that. What does it make you feel if you feel that you've been betrayed? Does it make you feel unsafe on some deep root level, or that you can't trust, or something? Just looking at that and then questioning that. There's things happening that's making me feel this way,
Yeah, that's good, because I've done a lot of traveling on the spiritual bypass.
Haven't we all? We really have, on the expressway.
Yeah, I've been up there, and that's not a really good place. So I'll stay down here on the thoroughfare, Main Street. So
it actually becomes expressway once we embrace whatever emotion we're not really looking at fully. And of course you wouldn't want to feel this. Of course you wouldn't, but recognizing
Yeah.
the way forward is to really look at that. What's this trying to tell me? And then I can resolve it in the best way for everyone involved. It will resolve
Yes.
and unfold then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Lovely. Good to talk to you, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave it there for today. Some very brave, open, honest sharing today, as always. So I just want to thank you for that, because your own courage in sharing something that is very difficult to bring forward is helping everyone. And it is also, as I was saying at the start, inside all of us. And none of us want to look at stuff like this. But when we actually do, and when we do it as a group like this, it's powerful. So I hope you can feel that something fundamental shifts when we face the unfaceable. And whether we do that in our own satsang or in a group like this, we can and do have the strength to do that always, somewhere inside us. So thank you. Namaste.